Elizabeth Ann Hanks's revelations have sent ripples through Hollywood and beyond, shaking the image of Tom Hanks that has been cherished by audiences for decades. While fans remember him as the affable Forrest Gump, the courageous Captain Miller in Saving Private Ryan, or the endearing Chuck Noland in Cast Away, E.A. Hanks presents a different version of the man. One who, behind the closed doors of his growing stardom, allegedly failed to offer his daughter the emotional stability she needed. In a recent interview, E.A. Hanks speaks not with bitterness, but with the weary clarity of someone who has held in her story for too long. She doesn't accuse her father of physical abuse or any scandalous misconduct, but instead describes what she terms emotional violence, a phrase that reflects years of feeling invisible and unheard in a household dominated by fame, ambition, and the pursuit of public perfection. She recounts moments from her childhood when her father, though physically present at times, seemed emotionally distant, preoccupied with his roles, rehearsals, and relentless travel schedules. It was like living with a ghost who smiled a lot, she explains. He was always just out of reach. E.A. Hanks was only a toddler when her father landed his breakout role in Splash, and by the time she was a teenager, Tom Hanks had become one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. Yet, in E.A.'s words, that success came at a cost. The demands of the industry meant long periods of absence, and when he was home, the emotional tone was often muted or strained. I remember dinners where we sat in silence, or conversations that felt like monologues, she says. He was charming, but it was like that charm was something he put on, not something we, as his kids, ever truly got to know. She also touches on the environment of her upbringing, a world full of privileges, yes, but one lacking in emotional support. Despite attending good schools and living in affluent neighborhoods, E.A. says there was a profound sense of isolation. Her mother, Samantha Lewis, was battling her own struggles, including health issues and the aftershocks of her divorce from Hanks. There was love, but it was fractured, E.A. notes. My mom did what she could, but we were all kind of surviving in our own corners. These revelations complicate the public's view of Tom Hanks. For years, he has been upheld as a model of integrity, someone who managed to remain grounded in an industry known for devouring its stars. But E.A.'s experience raises questions about how much of that image is the result of savvy media management and how much reflects reality. She doesn't seek to cancel or condemn her father, but rather to tell her truth, a truth that includes both admiration for his talent and sadness for what was missing in their relationship. In recent years, E.A. Hanks has carved out her own identity, far from her father's long shadow. As a writer, she has explored themes of identity, legacy, and self-worth, often through deeply personal essays. She admits that discussing her childhood publicly is a risk, one that could bring backlash, especially from those who idolize her father. But for her, the choice to speak out is about reclaiming her own narrative. I'm not trying to destroy anyone, she says. I'm just finally saying what I needed to say. Tom Hanks has not yet responded publicly to his daughter's comments, and it remains to be seen how or if he will address them. For many, this new layer of complexity may not erase decades of admiration, but it does challenge the public to consider the possibility that even the most beloved figures can have deeply flawed private lives. As E.A. Hanks continues to share her story, she offers a quiet but powerful reminder that behind every Hollywood image is a real person, and sometimes real pain. Elizabeth Ann Hanks's revelations continue to peel back layers of what many assumed was a picture-perfect family life. At the core of her account lies a deeply felt narrative of emotional neglect and abandonment, not from a stranger or a distant relative, but from one of the most beloved figures in American entertainment. Her most serious claims revolve around a pattern of emotional abuse and long stretches of neglect, made even more painful by the contrast between Tom Hanks's warm, fatherly public image and the cold, inconsistent presence she experienced in her private life. Though E.A. refrains from offering specific allegations that might ignite legal battles or tabloid frenzies, her words are clear and deliberate. She speaks not from a place of vengeance, but from years of introspection and pain. According to her, the affection she did receive from her father felt transactional. something that depended on appearances, timing, or public image, rather than a genuine emotional bond. There was love there, she says, but it was inconsistent and conditional. When everything looked good from the outside, that's when I'd get attention. But when I needed real support, when I was falling apart, he wasn't there. The genesis of these fractures appears to date back to Tom Hanks's early career and his marriage to Samantha Lewis. Before the fame, they were two young actors struggling to make ends meet. Once Hanks's career took off, first with television and then skyrocketing film success, the cracks in their relationship widened. By 1987, the marriage had ended. EA, just 5 at the time, found her world upended, while the media focused on Hanks's rising star. She was left grappling with feelings of confusion and loss that no child could easily process. Samantha Lewis, by all accounts, retreated from the Hollywood machine with intention. Described as private, grounded, and uninterested in fame, she chose to shield her children from the spotlight, even as their father became a household name. Her decision to keep a low profile perhaps protected EA from the full glare of celebrity culture, but it also meant that the family lived largely separate from the world that her father now inhabited. After her mother's untimely death from bone cancer in 2002, EA lost her primary source of stability. My mom was the anchor, she says. Even when things were hard, she was there. When she died, I felt like I had no real home left. The years following her parents' divorce were some of the most difficult. As Hanks remarried and built a new life with actress Rita Wilson, EA felt herself being quietly pushed further to the margins. Wilson and Hanks had 2 sons together, and as his family expanded and his fame continued to soar, EA began to feel more like an outsider. Her father's roles as noble, caring father figures on screen were, to her, bitter reminders of what she never experienced off-screen. It's surreal to watch the world praise your dad for being the ultimate father, when all you remember are the missed birthdays and broken promises, she says. Even the small moments, holidays, phone calls, gifts, became symbols of her emotional isolation. She describes Christmas mornings where carefully wrapped presents would arrive not with a personal visit or heartfelt note, but via courier services or assistants. On her birthday, the phone might ring late in the evening or not at all. These seemingly minor slights accumulated into something heavier over time, a profound sense of being overlooked. It's not about the gifts or the calls, she explains. It's about what those things represent. I was growing up and he wasn't there to see it. He didn't seem to care to be. In sharing these memories, EA is not simply airing grievances. Rather, she is offering a rare and raw glimpse into the emotional dissonance that can exist in families fractured by fame, distance, and denial. She acknowledges the complexity of her father, that he may very well be a kind person to many, but that kindness did not extend fully into their relationship. She's aware that her words might be met with skepticism or even anger by those who idolize her father, but she is also firm in her belief that telling the truth, her truth, is an act of healing. For her, speaking out is not an act of revenge, but one of reclamation. After a lifetime of feeling like a footnote in someone else's story, EA is finally writing her own EA. Hanks's most unsettling allegations revolve around what she calls emotional violence, a phrase that strikes at the heart of her childhood trauma. While she stops short of giving explicit details, a decision she attributes to both ongoing therapy and a desire to avoid re-traumatizing herself, her words carry the weight of lived experience. She speaks with the quiet conviction of someone who has spent years trying to untangle a complex emotional history. When a parent makes you feel invisible, she says, when your emotional needs are treated as inconveniences or dismissed outright, that's a form of violence. Just because the bruises aren't visible doesn't mean the pain isn't real. Her use of the term violence is deliberate. It's not meant to sensationalize or accuse in a legal sense, but rather to describe the deep and lingering wounds of emotional neglect. For EA, it wasn't one moment or one incident. It was a pattern, a series of small, cumulative actions and inactions that told her over and over again that she didn't matter. She recalls the feeling of walking on eggshells, of always trying to perform the role of the perfect child, not out of love, but out of fear of being ignored or discarded. Children absorb so much, she says. And when the message you keep getting is that your feelings are a burden, you learn to bury them. You learn to disappear in plain sight. The psychological toll of growing up under those conditions was enormous. EA speaks openly about battling depression from a young age. She describes long periods of feeling hollow, unworthy, and alone. Emotions made more confusing by the constant public adoration directed at her father. Imagine turning on the TV and seeing the world cheer for the man who couldn't return your phone call, she says. It messes with your sense of reality. It makes you question whether your pain is even valid. She also battled anxiety and crippling self-doubt well into adulthood, struggles that she traces directly to the emotional environment of her upbringing. Her achievements, academic success, publishing milestones, professional accomplishments, were all colored by a desperate need for approval she never received. I spent years trying to earn his love, she says. If I could just be perfect enough, perfect grades, perfect behavior, the perfect daughter, maybe then he'd see me. Maybe then I'd matter. But the truth is, no child should have. To earn a parent's love, that love should be the starting point, not a reward. These revelations are jarring in the context of Tom Hanks's carefully crafted public persona. Known for his warmth, humility, and generosity, Hanks has long been the standard-bearer for how to maintain decency in an industry that so often rewards ego. Colleagues routinely speak of his kindness on set, his dedication to craft, and his unwavering professionalism. His philanthropic work, generous donations to children's hospitals, support for veterans, and advocacy for historical preservation has only strengthened his image as a moral compass in Hollywood. But EA is adamant that these public gestures, while meaningful, paint only part of the picture. Fame gives people the ability to curate their image down to the smallest detail, she says. My father is very good at that. The world sees what he wants them to see, the charming interviews, the warm smile, the everyman roles. But I lived a reality that was very different from what's in the press. Her comments raise uncomfortable questions about the nature of celebrity and the gulf between public perception and private behavior. EA does not accuse a good parent. See her father of being a bad person? She acknowledges his talent, his charisma, and the good he has done. But she also insists that being admired by millions doesn't negate the responsibility one has to their own children. You can be kind to strangers and still fail the people closest to you, she says. That's what people don't understand. A good reputation doesn't equal the emotional dissonance between her father's global popularity and her own. Experience of neglect is something EA is still working through in therapy. She doesn't see herself as a victim, but as someone who has been shaped by pain and is now trying to make sense of it. Speaking out, for her, is part of that healing. It's a way of reclaiming her story from the shadows of someone else's fame. She knows there will be backlash, that some will see her words as a betrayal, or worse, as a publicity stunt. But for EA, the risk is worth it. I'm not trying to ruin anyone's legacy, she says quietly. I'm just trying to tell the truth, the kind of truth that doesn't fit in a press junket or a red carpet interview. Whether the world chooses to listen remains to be seen, but one thing is clear. E.A. Hanks has found her voice, and she's no longer afraid to use it. Despite the emotional weight of E.A. Hanks' revelations, Tom Hanks has remained publicly silent. His representatives, when approached for comment, offered no clarification or rebuttal, instead repeating the long-held stance that Hanks does not address personal family matters through the media. For EA, this silence is not just an avoidance of conflict, but a continuation of the pattern that shaped her childhood, a pattern of control, emotional distance, and denial. His whole life has been about controlling the narrative, she says. Why would this be any different? EA interprets this lack of response as deeply symbolic. Throughout her life, she says, it often felt as though her father's silence or absence was a deliberate act, not just a result of career demands, but an unwillingness to engage with emotional realities that didn't fit neatly into the image he projected to the world. His refusal to acknowledge her pain publicly only reinforces, in her eyes, the emotional neglect that defined their relationship. It's easier to stay silent and let the public assume I'm just bitter or broken, she says. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done waiting for something that's never coming. Now in her early 40s, EA says she has finally arrived at a place where her story no longer feels like a weight she has to carry in isolation. Years of therapy and inner work have allowed her to revisit her past without being overwhelmed by it. She has worked to untangle her self-worth from her father's approval, a process she describes as both painful and liberating. For most of my life, I believed that if I just did enough, succeeded enough, behaved enough, loved him enough, that maybe, just maybe, he would love me in return the way I needed, she says. But that's not how love works. It shouldn't be earned like an award. Coming forward now is not about revenge or public shaming. EA is acutely aware of how beloved her father is, and how her account will be difficult for many to accept. But her purpose, she explains, is not to tear anyone down. It's to speak for those whose experiences have been minimized, dismissed, or hidden behind family reputations. There are so many people walking around with pain like mine, people who were hurt by parents who seemed perfect on the outside, she says, and they think their pain isn't real because no one else sees it. If my story helps even one person stop blaming themselves, then it's worth it. Her words invite a deeper examination of how society constructs and protects the images of celebrities, especially those who embody archetypes like the loving father or the moral everyman. Tom Hanks has played those roles so convincingly that it's difficult for many to separate the man from the mythology, but EA's story reminds us that fame is not a guarantee of character, and talent does not always translate into personal virtue. The dissonance between how someone is perceived and how they behave in private can be profound and damaging to those closest to them. To the public, Tom Hanks may always be America's dad, a comforting symbol of integrity, decency, and warmth, but for EA, he remains a far more complicated figure. Her memories of him are not shaped by his movie roles or charitable donations, but by the emotional absence she felt for much of her life. No amount of fame changes the fact that children need their parents to show up, she says. Not just for a photo op or a holiday, not just on screen, in real life. And when they don't, when they consistently choose their work or their image over their child, the damage doesn't just disappear, it lasts. Sometimes, it lasts forever.